Hey everybody, Jason Blaha here with Ice Cream Fitness. I'm just sitting here in my robe drinking my morning coffee, looking sexy as hell as usual. And the topic I want to cover today, I see a lot of talk of this, and we've seen this for years and years in the fitness industry, the bodybuilding industry, dieting industry. All of this talk of different percentages of macronutrients, and macronutrients being carbs, fat, and protein. And different people have tried to sell different ratios as either just general guidelines or, as Dr. Barry Spears tried to do with the zone diet, as actual magic formulas that will inhibit fat loss and alter prostaglandin ratios and things. And the reality of it is that this is all nonsense. These different ratios, macronutrient ratios and percentages that people have come up with over the years are not based in science. They're completely arbitrary, and they're numbers people have just made up. And I will actually go so far as to say that trying to follow macronutrient percentages can actually be detrimental to your physique, can be detrimental to your diet adherence, and in some cases actually detrimental to your health. And I will break it down and give you just some quick examples of this. Take the really popular 40-40-20 macronutrient breakdown that a lot of people like to use. It's promoted on bodybuilding sites and forums, fitness forums, things like that. What it means is that you get 40% of your calories from protein, 40% of your calories from carbs, and 20% of your protein from fat. The problem is that this is just arbitrarily made up. And as you guys know, I promote the idea of eating a minimum amount of fat and protein based upon your body weight or at least your lean body mass in grams, not percentages, hitting those numbers for one, hormone balance, vitamin absorption, and then muscle building and muscle sparing purposes, and then filling the remainder of your calories however you see fit, with a heavy bias towards carbs. And I would even go so far as to say you could fill all of your calories with carbs and do very, very well on this type of setup. Or you could fill half of those remaining calories with carbs and whatever split you want of fat and protein. And it's going to generally yield you the same results. You're not going to see much, if any, variation in the results you get doing this, and you don't even have to eat the same ones day to day. The problem with something like the 40-40-20 there is that immediately look at the fat intake. When you start plugging your minimum numbers in for optimal hormone balance and sex hormone production, and particularly testosterone production, which is useful for both building muscle and losing fat, when you plug that 20% number in, for a lot of people and not everybody, yes, for bulking and possibly even maintenance, you might hit that number and be okay on the 20% fat. But I can assure you, almost nobody, unless you have an insanely high TDEE and you do huge amounts of activity, almost nobody is going to get adequate fat intake on 20% fat once they start cutting and they're in a caloric deficit. You're going to be fat deficient. And I can assure you that having your fat fall below this level on a prolonged cut when you're in a caloric deficit is going to not only cost you muscle mass, but it's going to decrease your quality of life when your sex drive goes down. For men, when you start developing issues like erectile dysfunction. For women, when you start having issues with vaginal dryness and other things because your sex hormones have plummeted, you will find out very quickly that the 40-40-20 is not ideal for cutting. So let's look at it for bulking. We run into another problem there. Assuming you get enough fat, the other issue becomes, sure, for cutting, the 40% might hit the right protein numbers for cutting, but it might not, because again, it's really arbitrary. But for bulking purposes, someone like me, my bulking calories, 40% of my calories from protein on a bulk is going to be something like double the amount of protein I need for optimal gains. So are there really negatives to consuming that much protein? Because again, as a lot of us know who are familiar with nutrition, and as I pointed out in other videos, yes, beyond a threshold, most of your dietary protein is just converted into carbs once a certain threshold is reached. So the question becomes, is there really a negative to overeating on it? Is it a good insurance policy? And I would say no, it's not a good insurance policy, because consuming more protein than you need for optimal muscle gains which is generally going to be no higher than 1 gram per pound of body weight and arguably actually slightly lower based upon scientific data. Going well above this for someone not using anabolic steroids is not going to produce any more muscle mass. It's just going to convert into glucose. It's not going to necessarily help you build muscle. So the negatives of this come in the fact that, one, there's a financial cost to consider. Meaning, at least in the country I'm living in the UK right now, lean protein is extremely expensive. And following a 40-40-20 with the fat that low means most of my protein is going to have to be really lean. And I would say that for me, probably 70% of my grocery budget covers my protein sources, if not more, if not 80% of my budget. So for me to go ahead and just double my protein, almost double my monthly grocery bill. And for anybody on a budget, I assure you, almost regardless of where you live, carbohydrates are going to cost a lot less than protein. So you're basically buying more expensive carbohydrates and boosting your food bill. There's also the fact to consider that because you're eating so much protein, you're limiting other food choices, and so it might actually limit the foods that you enjoy eating in order to stuff more lean protein down, which isn't necessarily good on a bulk. It really seems like a wasted bulk to me if you don't get to eat more of your favorite foods that you're going to have to eat less of when you go into a cut just so that you can hit an arbitrarily high protein number every day, is really, from a satisfaction factor, is really a negative on a bulk. Then there's the satiation factor to consider. There is the fact that we know that protein is extremely satiating, and it's the most satiating of the 3 micronutrients. For someone who's a bit of an undereater, who struggles to eat a caloric surplus consistently, trying to hit 40% protein calories is going to be a disaster for them. And then you've got the issue of the fact that you're adding needless complexity. You're trying to hit these ratios every day instead of hit your minimums and just eat whatever you want for the remainder of your calories. It actually requires you to do unnecessary and pointless math and add stress to your actual diet process that doesn't need to be there. It serves no purpose, serves no benefit other than to make you do additional math and cause more stress. The most negative potential of that is that if this sort of thing stresses you out and you're actually having to worry about it every day, it might actually elevate your cortisol levels and reduce the gains that you get as a result of it. So there's even the potential there, in an extreme case, of actually not gaining as much muscle mass as a result of the stress of it. So that being said, since we know that ratios don't even need to stay the same day to day, that there's no benefit, that macros can actually change quite a bit day to day without negatively impacting your changes in body composition, your gain in muscle, your loss in body fat, that you can be fairly flexible with a lot of that. And that we know that these percentages are not only arbitrary, but in some cases potentially detrimental, and they serve no benefit whatsoever, and they were just made up by people. It should become apparent that there is absolutely no use for them, no point in using them, and no point in even bothering knowing what those percentages are in regards to your gains or progress. They're just completely pointless. And my advice to you is to completely ignore the percentages. And when someone tries to advise you to use these percentages or tries to give you a diet based upon this idea, it should become apparent at this point, now that this has been pointed out, that this person may not actually know what they're talking about in terms of nutritional science. And I hope this has been informative for everybody. But hold on, let me give you guys a bicep shot. I went through this whole video without giving you one. And I'll talk to you next time.